last weapon Ragna Stonehand ever forged came back to her in 2 pieces. The brother who had carried it did not. 7 years later, on a rain-heavy evening when the gutters of Ashfall ran black with soot, a human knight placed those 2 broken pieces on her anvil and said, "I do not want you to repair it. I want you to turn it into a wedding ring." For a long moment, the only sound inside the forge was the patient breathing of the coals. Ragna stood on the opposite side of the anvil with both hands braced against scarred iron. She was tall even for an orc, broad through the shoulders, with deep green skin darkened by years of furnace heat. Copper rings threaded the end of her heavy black braid. One of her lower tusks had been chipped in the war, and a pale burn ran from her left wrist nearly to her elbow. Most people noticed those things before they noticed her eyes. Sir Alden Marr had always noticed her eyes first. They were amber, and at that moment they were murderous. "Take it away," she said. Alden did not touch the sword. Rain shone on his brown hair and rolled from the shoulders of a plain traveling cloak. He had once been painted in polished silver armor, standing beneath banners while poets called him the Lion of Bell Harbor. Time had been less flattering and far more honest. A narrow scar crossed his jaw. His right knee did not bend properly in cold weather. There were silver threads at his temples, though he was only 36. "Ragna, you know the rule. I know every rule posted on your door." He glanced toward the wooden board hanging beside the entrance. Ragna had carved the words herself in both the human trade script and the angular letters of her own people. No swords, no spears, no arrowheads, no exceptions. Beneath the final line, someone had added in chalk, "Not even for handsome idiots." Alden had written that part 2 winters ago. Ragna had never erased it. "Then you know I do not work weapon steel," she said. "I am not asking for a weapon. You brought one into my home. I brought you a memory." Her fist struck the anvil hard enough to make the broken blade jump. "Do not tell me what you brought me." The shout carried through the rear wall. Somewhere beyond it, her apprentice stopped stacking firewood. Ragna heard the boy's boots hesitate, then retreat with admirable wisdom. Alden remained still. That was one of the things she hated about him. Men who feared her were easy. Men who despised her were easier. She could throw either kind into the street and sleep peacefully afterward. Alden never gave her the comfort of fear or contempt. He simply stood there with those gray-blue eyes and looked as if every angry word she gave him was something he had already decided to deserve. Ragna looked down despite herself. Even broken and rust-stained, she knew the blade. The fuller curved slightly near the hilt because her brother Corin had insisted straight lines were boring. A tiny mountain hawk had been stamped beneath the guard. Her first maker's mark, her proudest work, her greatest shame. She had forged it when she was 24 and still foolish enough to believe a beautiful weapon could make an ugly cause honorable. Corin had kissed her forehead, swung the sword once in the yard, and declared that it was light enough to dance with. 3 months later, the armies of Ashfall marched east. 6 weeks after that, Sir Alden Marr returned without Corin. He had returned without the sword too, until now. "Where did you find it?" she asked. "At Red Hollow." The name entered the forge like a cold wind. Ragna's fingers curled against the anvil. "You told my mother nothing remained there." "I told her there was nothing I could bring home." "That sounds different only to a coward." His face tightened, but he accepted the blow. "Yes." She expected an excuse. None came. Outside, wagon wheels hissed through rain. The city bells marked the closing of the western gates. One bell, then another, their notes softened by distance and weather. Ragna stared at the broken sword. Why now? Because I spent 7 years believing I had no right to return it. And tonight you discovered courage? No. Tonight I ran out of time. He reached into his cloak slowly and placed a folded cream letter beside the sword. The blue wax seal belonged to the royal arsenal. Ragna did not open it. She already knew what it said. Similar letters had reached every working forge in the southern districts. Border raids had begun along the Vale. The crown wanted 500 spearheads, 200 short swords, and enough arrowheads to turn the eastern sky black. The order called it an emergency levy. Ragna called it the first drumbeat of another war. An inspector comes tomorrow, Alden said. Master Holt intends to seize any forge that refuses the levy. Let him try. He will not come alone. Ragna smiled without humor. Neither will I be. Her neighborhood would stand with her. Orc masons, human dock workers, widows who remembered casualty lists, and boys who had grown up watching Ragna turn discarded helmets into cooking pots. They would crowd the street. They would shout. Perhaps soldiers would hesitate. Perhaps they would not. Alden seemed to read the thought. If blood is spilled in this district, Holt will call it an uprising. The crown will send more men. He wants you angry. Then he has finally shown talent for something. There is another way. Ragna looked from the letter to the broken sword, then back to his face. The ring. The Charter of Allied Houses protects the private workshops of decorated officers and their families from emergency seizure. It was written after the armistice so returning soldiers could rebuild their lives without the crown taking their trades from them. I know the charter. I also know I am not your family. Alden held her gaze. Not yet. The coals shifted with a soft collapse. At last she said, You walked through a storm to make a joke in my forge? I have never been more serious. You want to marry me? Yes. By tomorrow. Before the inspector arrives. She came around the anvil. Alden was tall for a human, but Ragna still had several inches on him. She stopped close enough to smell rain, leather, and the faint, clean scent of the cedar soap he bought from the widow across the lane. His eyes rose to meet hers. Do you imagine I need a human husband to save me? She asked. No. Do you imagine your name makes me safe? My name has never made anyone safe. Then what exactly are you offering? A legal wall between Holt and your door. My testimony if he challenges the marriage. My house, though the roof leaks. Half my pension, though it is insulting. And the truth about Red Hollow whenever you are ready to hear it. There it was, the one thing worth more than his charter, his house, or every gold coin in Ashfall. Ragna hated him for knowing it. And what do you receive? His expression changed so slightly, another person might have missed it. Ragna had watched metal change color by fractions in a furnace. She knew the difference between heat and fire. The chance to protect something without drawing a sword, he said. It was not the whole answer. That frightened her more than the proposal. A door creaked at the back of the forge. Ragna turned. Her apprentice, Noel, peered around the frame with a bundle of wood in his arms. He was 19, narrow for an orc, with one ear that bent forward and a gift for appearing whenever silence became interesting. Should I come back after the wedding? He asked. Ragna pointed toward the yard. Noel vanished. Alden's mouth twitched. If you smile, she warned, I will make your wedding ring small enough to stop your blood. Then I will treasure it briefly. She should have thrown him out. Instead, she picked up the longer piece of the sword. The steel was colder than she expected. Beneath rust and mud, the pattern of her old folding technique shimmered like smoke trapped in ice. She had spent months on it, refining the metal until Corin could balance the naked blade across 2 fingers. Now a brutal fracture splitted a handspan above the guard. Not a clean break. The edge had rolled before it failed. There were small dents along both sides, dozens of them, as though Corin had struck steel again and again until the blade could bear no more. "You carried this from Red Hollow?" she asked. "Part of the way. And then?" "I buried it." Her gaze snapped up. "Why?" "Because every time I looked at it, I remembered what I had done." "What did you do?" Alden's jaw tightened. "If I tell you tonight, you will send me away." "Perhaps I should. Perhaps. But by noon tomorrow this forge will belong to Holt." Ragna wanted to call him manipulative. He was. She wanted to call him dishonest. He had admitted as much. Yet the fear beneath his restraint was not fear for himself. His eyes kept moving toward the rear wall, beyond which Noel and 2 other apprentices slept above the storeroom. Then toward the shelves of kettles, hinges, plow fittings, lamp hooks, and tiny iron animals Ragna made for children who brought her bent nails as payment. He understood what the forge had become. After the war, Ragna had returned to Ashfall carrying an army hammer and a hatred of every ringing blade. She found the old family workshop boarded shut. Her father had died while she was away. Her mother had moved north to live with cousins. The street was full of returning soldiers who had no work and families who owned nothing that war had not broken. Ragna reopened the forge, but not for weapons. Her first commission was a soup pot made from 3 breastplates. Her second was a set of hinges for a school. Then came nails, shovels, stove doors, locks, pruning hooks, wagon rims, and bells. People laughed at the warrior smith making spoons until they realized the spoons lasted longer than their roofs. 7 years later, the Black Anvil employed 4 apprentices and supplied half the southern ward. Ragna had not saved the world. She had made it slightly harder to break. Tomorrow, Holt would try to turn it back into an armory. She set the blade on the anvil. "A marriage under the Allied Charter requires 2 witnesses," she said. "I have one." "Of course you do." "My sister Mara is waiting at the hearth chapel." Ragna stared. "Your sister is waiting?" "She said you would either agree or kill me. She wanted to be nearby for both possibilities." "I am beginning to like your sister." "Most people do." "Who is the second witness?" Alden glanced toward the rear door. Noel's voice came immediately from the other side. "I am available." Ragna closed her eyes. When she opened them, Alden was trying very hard not to smile. "There will be conditions," she said. "Name them." "You do not command me. You do not speak for me unless I ask. You do not enter my room, touch my tools, or move anything in this forge." "Reasonable." "You sleep in the loft." "The loft has no stove." "Then you will appreciate marriage for its warmth." This time he did smile. It changed his whole face, erasing the famous night and revealing the troublesome man who had visited her shop every 6th day for 3 years to buy objects he plainly did not need. Alden owned 17 fire pokers. Ragna knew because she had made all of them. "One more condition," she said. The smile faded. She tapped the broken sword. "Before this false marriage ends, you tell me everything that happened to Corin." "Yes." "Not the version officers gave the families. Not something polished until it shines. The truth." "The truth," he promised. Ragna looked toward the clock on the wall. It was nearly 8. The hearth chapel closed at midnight, and the sword would need hours in the furnace before she could work it. "Noel," she called. The rear door opened at once. "Wake the forge," Ragna said. "We have a wedding ring to make." Noel looked delighted. Alden looked relieved. Ragna looked at the blade her brother had carried into war and wondered whether she had just agreed to save her forge or invited the war itself back inside. The sword resisted the furnace. Old weapon steel often did. It remembered the shape men had demanded of it. Ragna had always believed that, though scholars mocked smiths for speaking as if metal possessed a soul, scholars rarely spent their lives listening to iron scream. Noel pumped the bellows, while Ragna separated the usable sections from the ruined core. Alden removed his cloak and stood where she placed him, safely away from the sparks. He had changed out of armor years ago, but he still held himself like a soldier awaiting orders. "If you intend to become useful," Ragna said, "roll your sleeves." He obeyed. His forearms were crossed with old scars. One pale line disappeared beneath his right cuff. Another marked the inside of his wrist, directly below where a sword guard would rest. Ragna handed him a long pair of tongs. "Hold the smaller piece at the center. If it slips, let it fall." "I know how to hold steel." "You know how to wave it at frightened men. This is different." Noel choked on a laugh. Alden accepted the correction without complaint. Together they lowered the broken piece into the brightest part of the coals. Heat deepened its color from black to bruised red, then cherry, then orange. The old oil burned away first, carrying with it the smell of leather, rust, and distant rain. Ragna watched every change. Beside her, Alden's face shone with sweat. "Who is she?" Ragna asked. "Who? The woman foolish enough to wear this ring?" His grip on the tongs shifted. "Someone difficult," he said. "That describes half the city. She is proud. The other half, then? She thinks kindness is a debt trap. She trusts old iron more than living people. She threatens customers and overcharges nobles." Ragna glanced at him. "You should marry her quickly. She sounds desirable." "I think so." There was warmth in his voice that had nothing to do with the furnace. Ragna looked back at the steel before he could see the sudden uncertainty in her face. Rumors claimed Alden was courting Lady Celestine Harrow, the governor's elegant niece. Celestine was proud, certainly. She had once returned a silver necklace because the clasp was not perfectly centered. She also possessed both tusks and green skin only in the most imaginative tavern songs. So the rest of his description made little sense. Unless he was mocking Ragna. Unless he was not. She tightened her hand around the hammer. "The metal is ready," she said. They drew it from the fire. The first hammer blow sent sparks across the room like a burst of stars. The second rang through the floor. Ragna fell into the old rhythm. Turn, strike, breathe, strike. She did not flatten the steel into an edge. She folded it inward, removing the narrow length that had once been designed to cut. Each blow shortened it, thickened it, changed its purpose. Alden watched with an expression she could not name. "You are staring," she said. "I have never seen you work this close. You have been in my forge every week for 3 years. You usually make me stand by the door. You usually ask for fire pokers. My hearth is demanding. Your hearth is building an army." Noel laughed openly this time. Ragna lifted the hammer again. Alden's hand moved without thought, steadying the tongs as she struck. He anticipated the turn correctly. When she changed the angle, he changed with her. She frowned. "Who taught you forge work?" His eyes remained on the glowing steel. "Koran." The hammer stopped in midair. Even Noel went silent. "When?" Ragna asked. "At the eastern camp. He said any officer who depended on a blade should know how to repair a loose guard." That sounded exactly like her brother. Corin had distrusted people who ate food they could not cook and carried tools they could not mend. Ragna set the hammer down with deliberate care. He spoke of me? Alden's smile was small and painfully genuine. Constantly. What did he say? That you were the finest smith in the Allied army. That you cheated at stones. That you once broke a tax collector's cart and repaired it before he stopped shouting. That you were afraid of geese. I am not afraid of geese. He was very clear about the geese. Noel looked toward Ragna with delighted discovery. Leave, she told him. But the bellows, Alden can pump them. The apprentice fled before she could reconsider. When the rear door closed, the forge felt larger and more dangerous. Ragna returned the steel to the fire. You never told us you knew him. Your mother asked whether he suffered. I could not answer without telling her why. And you chose silence. I chose cowardice. You say that word as if naming it makes it noble. It does not. He worked the bellows. Heat lifted his damp hair from his forehead. For a decorated knight, he took instruction well. For a man proposing a fraudulent marriage, he was strangely careful not to stand too close. Ragna watched the sword lose itself in the coals. Did he give it to you? She asked. Alden's hand slowed. Yes. Before he died? Yes. Why? His throat moved. That belongs to the whole truth. Anger rose, quick and familiar, but the clock continued its steady march toward midnight. Ragna turned back to the work. The ring would need time. So, apparently, would the man. By 11:30, the sword had become a short square rod no longer than Ragna's hand. She cut 2 pieces from it. Alden looked up. 2? A wedding binds 2 people, unless human law has become even more foolish since I last checked. I brought my mother's ring for myself. Then put it away. He reached into his shirt and drew out a thin gold band on a cord. It was worn nearly smooth. Ragna expected him to argue, but he studied the small ring for a moment and closed his fist around it. Why? He asked. Because if this lie is to protect my forge, we carry equal parts of it. She returned both pieces to the fire. One band she shaped broad and simple, leaving the dark lines of folded steel visible. The other she made narrower but heavier at the center, where she pressed the blunt corner of Corin's hawk mark. The impression was imperfect. One wing faded into the grain. It was not the proud emblem that had once gleamed near the sword guard. It looked like a bird emerging from smoke. Alden touched it only after the metal cooled. His fingertip traced the mark. He would have liked this. Do not tell me what my brother would like. The words came sharply, but Ragna no longer had enough anger to give them force. Exhaustion had softened the room. Rain ticked against the high windows. The forge glowed low and red around them. Alden lifted his hand from the ring. Forgive me. Ragna placed the broader band in his palm. That one is yours. It will not fit. It will after I finish it. You measured my finger? I have eyes. His gaze moved to her face. Yes, you do. Something passed between them, quiet and warm, and far more dangerous than sparks. Ragna broke it by dropping the second band into the quenching oil. At 11:52, they left the forge. Noel walked ahead carrying a hooded lantern and trying unsuccessfully to hide his excitement. Ragna had changed into a clean, dark red tunic, but there had been no time to wash the soot from her forearms. Alden wore his rain cloak over a shirt marked with tiny burns. Neither of them looked prepared for a wedding. The southern ward had settled into uneasy sleep. Dark windows leaned above narrow streets. Old military banners had been cut into awnings and patched roof cloth. Here and there, the blue lamps of the city watch moved through the rain. Ragna kept one hand near the work knife at her belt. It was a tool, not a weapon, though the distinction could become philosophical when necessary. "You are limping," she said. "Cold weather." "You were not limping when you arrived." "I was attempting to appear marriageable." "You failed." "Then I am fortunate you are desperate." Noel made a strangled sound that might have been laughter. Ragna considered pushing both males into a gutter. The hearth chapel stood beneath the old western wall, built jointly after the armistice. Human stone arches framed an orc-style central fire pit. There were no statues, only a round opening in the roof through which smoke and rain could escape. Marriages made there were recognized by both the Crown and the mountain clans, though neither side was entirely pleased about it. Alden Marr waited beneath the portico. She was shorter than her brother, with the same gray-blue eyes and none of his restraint. A heavy wool coat covered her nightdress, and she held an umbrella in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. "You are alive," she said when she saw Alden. "I owe the chapel keeper 2 silver crowns." Then she turned to Ragna and smiled. "I have wanted to meet you for years. Your brother has not mentioned you. That is because I know all his embarrassing stories. We will speak privately. I hoped we might." Alden sighed. This alliance is already troubling. The chapel keeper emerged before midnight, wearing a ceremonial sash over striped sleeping clothes. Keeper Saul was an elderly half-orc with pale olive skin, blunt tusks, and the expression of someone who had witnessed every possible kind of foolishness and expected no improvement. He looked at Ragna, then Alden, then the sword steel rings. "Emergency charter marriage?" he asked. "Is it that obvious?" Alden said. "Real lovers usually look more frightened." Ragna almost laughed. The sound startled her enough that she turned it into a cough. They stood on opposite sides of the central fire. Noel and Mara took their places behind them. Rain fell through the roof opening and vanished in steam before touching the coals. Keeper Sol tied their right wrists together with a red cord. "The old clans say a household is a forge," he began. "One brings the iron, one brings the fire. Neither is useful without patience, and both can burn the house down." "Comforting," Ragna murmured. Alden's thumb shifted against the inside of her wrist. The touch was accidental. It still sent an unwelcome current along her arm. Keeper Sol continued. "Under mountain law, you must speak what you offer freely. Under crown law, you must state your names and consent. Under my law, you must do it before midnight, because I intend to return to bed." Mara covered a smile. Alden faced Ragna. Firelight warmed one side of his features. "I am Alden Marr," he said. "I offer my name without ownership, my house without demand, and my strength without command. I consent." The words were not part of any ceremony Ragna knew. They were answers to her conditions. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. "I am Ragna Stonehand," she said. "I offer shelter without obedience, work without servitude, and truth even when it cuts. I consent." Keeper Saul nodded. "Exchange the iron." Ragna slid the broad band onto Alden's finger. It fit perfectly. His hand was warm, the knuckles rougher than she had expected. When he placed the narrower band on hers, his fingers trembled once. She looked at him. He did not look away. "The crown ceremony ends with a kiss," Keeper Saul said. "The clan ceremony ends with shared blood. I recommend the crown." "Strongly," Noel whispered. Ragna had forgotten about the kiss. Judging by Alden's expression, he had not. He leaned closer, but stopped before touching her. "May I?" The question disturbed her more than confidence would have. Ragna had been kissed by soldiers who mistook sighs for invitation, and merchants who thought a gift purchased affection. No one had ever asked as if her answer mattered more than the watching law. "It is part of the lie," she said. "That is not an answer." She could feel Mara, Noel, and Keeper Saul waiting. "Yes," Ragna said. Alden lifted one hand, slowly enough for her to stop him, and rested it against the unscarred side of her jaw. His palm was calloused. His eyes remained open until the last instant. The kiss was brief. It should have felt ceremonial, no more intimate than signing a document. Instead, the warmth of his mouth seemed to travel directly to the sword-steel band on her finger. Ragna caught the scent of cedar again. She felt the soft drag of his beard and the careful way he avoided her tusks without making the avoidance obvious. When he drew back, his hand remained near her face. "Convincing," Mara said softly. Ragna stepped away so abruptly, the red cord tightened between their wrists. Keeper Saul cut it, sealed the marriage document, and declared them legally joined with 4 minutes remaining before midnight. Outside the chapel, Mara opened the wine. "To love, legal deception, and my brother finally doing one interesting thing with his title." "It is not love," Ragna said. "Of course not." Mara handed her the bottle. "That is why Alden has purchased 17 fire pokers from you." Alden closed his eyes. "Mara." Ragna looked from one sibling to the other. "How do you know how many?" "I clean his house when his leg is bad. They are in every room. There are 3 in the pantry." "The pantry hearth is temperamental," Alden said. "The pantry does not have a hearth." Ragna drank from the bottle to hide a smile. They returned to the forge shortly after 1. Noel went to wake the other apprentices and tell them the news in the loudest whisper Ragna had ever heard. Mara embraced her brother, then surprised Ragna by embracing her too. "He is a good man," she murmured, "but good men can still be fools. I had noticed." "Make him tell you." Ragna stiffened. "About Red Hollow?" Mara's smile vanished. "About everything." Before Ragna could ask what that meant, Mara raised her hood and disappeared into the rain. Alden stood in the forge holding a folded blanket. "The loft?" he asked. Ragna pointed toward the ladder. He climbed slowly, favoring his right knee. At the top, he paused. "Ragna." "What?" "Thank you." She looked at the ring on her hand. The dark steel seemed almost black against her green skin. "Do not thank me yet, husband. Holt arrives in 8 hours. Master Edric Holt arrived in 6. He came at dawn with 12 royal guards, 2 clerks, and 3 empty wagons, intended to carry away Ragna's tools. The rain had stopped, leaving the street bright with puddles and early light. The neighborhood gathered before the guards finished forming a line. Dock workers stood beside bakers. Human veterans leaned on canes beside orc widows wearing the bone beads of the eastern clans. Noel and the other apprentices blocked the forge doors with their bodies until Ragna ordered them inside. Holt dismounted from a gray horse. He was a narrow man with a silver beard cut to a perfect point and gloves too clean for the district. During the war, he had managed supply ledgers from a palace office. Since the war, he had spoken often about sacrifice. "Mistress Stonehand," he said, "you received the crown's order." "I received a request written by someone who does not know the price of charcoal." One clerk began writing that down. Holt glanced at him, and the quill stopped. "The emergency levy is not a request." "Then your grammar is as poor as your planning." Holt removed one glove finger by finger. By authority of the royal arsenal, this property and all equipment within are requisitioned until the border crisis has ended. No, Alden said. He stepped from the forge behind Ragna. He had changed into a dark formal coat bearing the small silver lion of Bell Harbor at the collar. There was no armor beneath it and no sword at his side. The steel wedding band caught the morning light. Holt's expression sharpened. Sir Alden, I was not informed you had taken an interest in weapon production again. I have taken an interest in my wife's property. Silence spread outward through the crowd. Holt looked at Ragna's hand, then Alden's. His face did not change, but a pulse appeared near his temple. Your wife. Ragna Stonehand Marr, under the Hearth Chapel seal and the Allied Charter. Ragna turned her head slightly. Stonehand. Alden corrected himself without hesitation. Ragna Stonehand, who has made the questionable decision to marry a Marr. Several people in the crowd laughed. Holt did not. When? Last night. Convenient? Marriage often is, Ragna said. Someone else reaches the high shelves. This time even one of the guards smiled. Holt looked toward the chapel keeper, who stood near the back of the crowd in the same ceremonial sash and, apparently, the same striped sleeping clothes. Keeper Saul lifted the sealed register. Lawful and witnessed, he called. Holt's gaze returned to Alden. The charter protects genuine households, not fraudulent arrangements made to obstruct crown authority. Then challenge it before the civil bench, Alden said. Until a magistrate dissolves the marriage, your levy has no power here. The old command had entered his voice. He did not raise it. He did not need to. The guards recognized it, and Ragna saw several straighten instinctively. Holt saw it too. You would hide behind a peacetime loophole while settlements burn? Alden's expression became very still. I spent 12 years watching men like you call graves a supply problem. I will not help you fill new ones. The silver point of Holt's beard trembled. You were once useful to this kingdom. I was once obedient. They are not the same. Holt put his glove back on. A magistrate will hear this within the week. Bring one who can read, Ragna said. He mounted and signaled the wagons away. The crowd waited until the last guard turned the corner. Then the street erupted. Noel shouted loudest. Someone began striking a spoon against a pot. Old Mrs. Vale from the bakery dragged Ragna down far enough to kiss both her cheeks and told Alden that if he broke the blacksmith's heart, she would poison his bread. She says that to every husband, Ragna explained. Mrs. Vale pointed the spoon at Alden. Only the ones I mean it about. For an hour, the forge became an accidental wedding feast. Neighbors brought warm rolls, smoked fish, small beer, and a cake that leaned dangerously to one side. Ragna stood in the center of it all, accepting embraces and jokes while feeling as if she had stepped into someone else's life. Alden remained near the door. People thanked him, but he redirected every word toward Ragna. When a former soldier called him lion, Alden looked away. Only once did their eyes meet across the crowd. His gaze dropped briefly to the ring on her hand. The memory of the chapel kiss returned with humiliating clarity. Ragna turned and nearly walked into a cake. By noon, the neighbors had gone, and the apprentices were too tired to pretend they were working. Ragna sent them home. She found Alden in the yard, splitting kindling. You are doing that badly, she said. I was a cavalry officer. Did the horses cut your wood? We had people. You no longer have people. You have a wife. He rested both hands on the axe handle. Is that what I have? The question held no teasing. Ragna crossed her arms. Until the magistrate decides otherwise. And after? After you return to your leaking house and organize your fire pokers. Of course. The answer came too quickly. It left a small, unreasonable hollow beneath her ribs. She took the axe from him, split the log cleanly, and handed it back. "The grain tells you where it wants to break," she said. "Stop fighting it." Alden examined the wood as though it were a military map. His second attempt was better. "You visited my forge for 3 years," Ragna said. "Why?" "I needed fire pokers." She held out her hand for the axe. He kept it. "The first time, perhaps. After that, I liked hearing you insult customers." "You crossed half the city every week for insults?" "The rich pay more for less." She tried not to smile. "And Lady Celestine?" The axe missed the log and struck the block at an angle. Ragna raised an eyebrow. "What about Lady Celestine?" he asked. "The governor's niece. Proud, difficult, desirable." Understanding dawned slowly, followed by an expression dangerously close to delight. "You believe the ring was intended for Celestine?" "I believed nothing. I asked a question." "Celestine married a glass merchant last spring." "I do not follow human society pages." "Apparently not." Ragna took a step closer. "If you laugh, I will improve your limp." He sobered, though the warmth remained in his eyes. "The woman I described has never attended a governor's ball." The yard became suddenly quiet. Ragna looked at the wedding band on her finger. "You planned this," she said. "The charter marriage, yes." "No, the ring. You planned to place it on my hand." Alden set the axe down. "I hope to." Her heart gave one hard, disobedient beat. "Why?" He moved toward her, then stopped at the distance he always kept, the careful space of a man approaching a wary animal. Ragna resented the comparison. She resented more that it worked. "Because you are the first person I met after the war who built something and did not pretend it erased what had been destroyed," he said. "Because you remember every apprentice's birthday and deny it. Because you charge nobles twice the fair price and use the difference to repair widows' stoves. Because when you laugh, which is rarely, you look surprised by your own happiness." Ragna could not speak. "And because," he continued quieter now, "for 3 years, the best hour of every week has been the hour I spent inventing reasons to stand in your doorway." There was no furnace to blame for the heat in her face. She stepped back. "You do not know me." "I know enough to want to." "You knew my brother. You kept his last hours from me. You buried his sword and watched me for 3 years without saying a word." Pain crossed Alden's face. "Yes. That is not love." "No," he said. "It is fear standing too close to love and hoping no one notices the difference." The honesty of it hurt more than a lie. Ragna turned toward the forge. "Sleep in the loft, Sir Alden. Do not mistake a legal bond for forgiveness." "I will not." She entered the workshop and closed the door behind her. Only then did she press the dark steel ring against her lips, furious that it was still warm. Marriage changed the forge in small, irritating ways. Alden woke before sunrise and made tea strong enough to remove rust. He folded blankets with military precision. He repaired the leaking roof over the coal shed without being asked, though Ragna discovered him only after he slipped and landed in a barrel of rainwater. He never moved her tools. That surprised her. Most people saw a crowded workbench and assumed disorder. Alden seemed to understand that every chisel, file, punch, and hammer had a place determined by reach and habit. When he needed something, he asked. When he finished with it, he returned it exactly. He also learned to split wood. By the 5th day, he could follow the grain. By the 8th, he stopped wearing his good coat for the task. By the 12th, Ragna caught herself watching the muscles move beneath his linen shirt and struck her thumb with a riveting hammer. "You are bleeding," Alden said. "I am aware." He crossed the forge with a clean cloth. Ragna tried to take it, but he held her wrist gently and wrapped the cut himself. "This is unnecessary. So are 17 fire pokers." She looked at him. He tied the cloth and released her at once. "I have learned from my mistakes. You are still here." "Not all of them." He listened when Ragna explained why a cooking pot needed a rolled rim. He listened when she cursed the price of coke. He listened when she woke from a nightmare and paced above the forge at 3 in the morning. He did not come upstairs. He simply lit the stove in the room below and waited until the warmth reached her floor. Ragna hated how much she noticed. The magistrate's summons arrived on the 9th day of their marriage. Master Holt challenged the union as fraudulent and demanded immediate dissolution. The hearing would be held in the Hall of Civic Accounts, a building designed to make every visitor regret learning to read. "We need evidence of a shared household," Alden said over breakfast. Ragna tore bread in half. "You sleep in my loft and ruin my tea. What more does the law require? Public recognition, joint expenses, mutual affection. The law requires affection. It requires the appearance of it. Humans finally found a way to tax kissing." Alden nearly dropped his cup. Ragna bit into the bread and pretended not to enjoy his reaction. The difficulty was public affection. Ashfall's Festival of Joined Fires happened 3 nights before the hearing. Every ward lit a communal brazier, and married couples traditionally danced around it wearing ribbons in their household colors. Failure to attend would be noticed. Attendance would be useful. Ragna had not danced since before the war. "Absolutely not," she said. "Holt will have observers there. Let them observe me eating. Married couples dance. Then human marriage is crueler than I understood." Alden leaned against the workbench. He had stopped limping in the warmer weather, though fatigue still pulled at the corner of his mouth after long days. "Koran said you were an excellent dancer. Koran also told people I feared geese. Was he wrong about both?" Ragna pointed a pair of hot tongs at him. "Ask another question and discover whether marriage protects you from fire." On the night of the festival, she went anyway. She told herself it was for the forge. Pella helped braid Ragna's hair with red copper wire. Mara arrived carrying a dark green dress with a fitted leather bodice and sleeves that left Ragna's strong shoulders bare. Ragna stared at it as if it were a siege device. "No." "Yes," Mara said. "I own clothes. You own 6 identical tunics and 1 funeral coat. They are practical. So is a bucket. Wear the dress." Ragna looked toward Pella for support. The apprentice studied the floor. "Traitors," Ragna muttered. The dress fit too well. It followed the shape of her waist and hips without restricting movement, and the dark color made her skin look richer. The neckline was lower than she preferred, but high enough for dignity. She left the pale burn on her forearm uncovered. Hiding it had never made it less real. When she descended into the forge, Alden was waiting in a charcoal coat with silver stitching at the cuffs. He looked at her and forgot to breathe. Ragna stopped on the last stair. "If there is something wrong with the dress, blame your sister." "There is nothing wrong with the dress." His voice had gone rough. The warmth that rose through Ragna had nothing to do with vanity. She had been admired before. Orc warriors had praised her strength. Human merchants had praised her unusual beauty when they wanted lower prices. Alden did neither. He looked at her as if beauty were not a favor he granted, but a truth that had surprised him by becoming visible. "You clean well?" she said. High praise. Do not become dependent on it. The festival filled Hammer Square with lanterns, drums, and the smell of roasted onions. Human ribbons fluttered beside clan banners. Children ran between tables carrying sugared nuts. At the center of the square, an enormous brazier burned with wood donated by every household. Ragna felt eyes follow them. Some looks were curious, some approving. Others held the old disgust she knew too well, directed either at an orc wearing a human knight's ring or at a knight lowering himself to walk beside her. Alden offered his arm. I can walk, she said. I know. He kept it offered. After a moment, she placed her hand against his sleeve. The crowd's attention became less important. They ate with Mara and the apprentices. Alden bought Ragna a cup of spiced cider and remembered she disliked cloves. She won 3 rounds of stones from retired sailors and accused the 4th man of cheating before he admitted it. For one almost peaceful hour, their marriage did not feel like a defense prepared for court. Then the drums changed. Couples moved toward the fire. No, Ragna said. Alden stood. One dance. I will step on your bad leg. Then I will finally have a believable injury story. Mara pulled the cup from Ragna's hand. Go. Alden led her to the circle. The dance was old, older than the divided kingdom. Partners began apart, moving in opposite directions around the fire, then met as the music quickened. Hands touched, separated, found each other again. Ragna remembered more than she wanted to. Her body found the rhythm before her mind could resist it. She turned beneath Alden's arm, braids sweeping across her back. He moved with the balance of a swordsman, careful of his knee, but never stiff. When he drew her close, his hand settled at her waist. The touch was proper. The heat it created was not. You lied, he murmured. About what? You dance beautifully. I never said I did not. You threatened me with fire. That is not the same thing. He smiled. Ragna felt it before she saw it, as if his happiness had weight against her body. Around them, the circle turned. Red and gold light moved over Alden's face. He was close enough that she could see the thin scar beside his mouth and the darker ring at the edge of his irises. Who taught you? He asked. Corin. The name did not ruin the moment. That surprised her. He stepped on my feet, she added. Then blamed my feet? Alden laughed. It was not the careful smile he gave customers. It was open and boyish, and Ragna suddenly understood that the famous knight had once been young. Before medals. Before Red Hollow. Before the weight he carried had bent every joy into something cautious. The song ended with partners facing one another. Hands joined over the firelight. The crowd began the traditional chant for a kiss. Ragna looked toward the edge of the square and spotted 2 of Holt's clerks pretending not to watch. Evidence, Alden said quietly. Of course. But he did not move. He waited. Ragna could have kissed his cheek. It would have satisfied the witnesses. Instead, she curled one hand into the front of his coat and pulled him down. This kiss was nothing like the chapel. Alden made a startled sound against her mouth, then his arm tightened around her waist. Ragna felt the careful restraint leave him by degrees. His hand rose to the back of her neck. Her tusk brushed his lower lip. The crowd, the clerks, and the music disappeared beneath the sudden certainty of wanting. When they separated, both were breathing too quickly. Convincing, Ragna whispered. His eyes had darkened. Entirely. She released his coat before she forgot why she should. They walked home through lantern light without speaking. Their shoulders brushed twice. Neither moved away. At the forge door, Alden stopped. Ragna. She kept her hand on the latch. It was for the hearing. If you need it to be. She turned. He stood one step below her, making their faces nearly level. And if I do not? She asked. Hope appeared so nakedly in his expression that she almost resented him for showing it. Then I would like to kiss my wife when no one is watching. Ragna opened the door. Come inside. The forge was dark except for the banked red glow beneath the ash. She heard Alden close the door behind them. For a moment, neither moved. Ragna had faced battle charges with less uncertainty. Desire was not unfamiliar to her, but tenderness was. Desire asked for the body. Tenderness asked to be trusted with everything that could be hurt. Alden took one slow step closer. May I? She answered by touching his face. The scar along his jaw was smooth beneath her thumb. He turned slightly into her palm, and that simple movement undid something she had spent years reinforcing. Their second kiss began gently. It deepened without hurry. Alden's hand settled on her waist, warm through the fitted leather. Ragna drew him closer until his chest met hers. He tasted of cider without cloves. When his fingers brushed the burn on her forearm, he paused. Does it hurt? He asked. Not for years. May I touch it? Ragna nodded. He traced the pale edge with 2 fingers, not reverent, not disgusted. Simply learning. She had never understood how powerful ordinary acceptance could feel. Then her hand moved across his chest and found the thin gold ring hanging beneath his shirt. His mother's ring. And beside it, on the same cord, a small bone bead carved in the Eastern clan style. Corin had worn beads like that in his braid. Ragna went still. Alden knew immediately what she had found. The warmth between them vanished. She pulled the cord into the light. The bead was cracked along one side, stained dark with age. A tiny mountain hawk had been scratched into it. Where did you get this? His hands fell away from her waist. Ragna. Where? From Corin. She released the cord as if it burned. You wore this against your heart for 7 years, and you told us nothing. I could not give it back without telling you what it meant. Then tell me now. Alden looked toward the forge floor. Not like this. Ragna's anger flared so fast she tasted iron. You do not choose the time anymore. I know. Then speak. He sat on the low bench beside the cold anvil. For the first time since she had known him, he looked old. Ragna remained standing. Alden held the bead between his fingers. Red Hollow was not supposed to be a battle. He began. It was a river town with one stone bridge. 600 civilians were waiting to cross west before the opposing army arrived. My company and Coran's clan guard were ordered to hold the eastern road until sunset. Ragna knew the official account. The defenders had been overwhelmed by superior numbers. Sir Alden had rallied the survivors and saved the bridge. Ragna Stonehand had died honorably, words polished until no blood remained on them. At noon, Alden continued, Master Holt arrived with new orders. The bridge was to be destroyed immediately. Ragna frowned. With civilians still east of the river? Yes. Why? The royal baggage train was approaching from the west. Holt believed enemy cavalry might cross and capture it. The answer was so obscene in its simplicity that Ragna could not speak. Food, uniforms, officer pay chests, Alden said. He valued them above the people on the road. And you obeyed him. At first. The word struck harder than if he had denied it. Alden's voice dropped. I ordered the engineers to prepare the charges. Corin heard me. He knocked me into the mud in front of both companies. Despite herself, Ragna saw it. Her brother, furious and bright-eyed, striking a decorated captain before hundreds of soldiers. He said, if I wanted to murder families for a wagon of boots, I should use my own hands. Then he gave me his sword and told me to defend the bridge while he went back for the last civilians. Alden touched the bead. Why give you the sword? My own had broken that morning. He said yours was too good for a fool, but the children deserved it. Ragna's breath caught. We disobeyed Holt, Alden said. I cut the fuses. My company formed at the bridge. Koran and 20 clan guards went into the town. They brought out nearly 200 people. Nearly. His eyes closed. The enemy reached the eastern road before the last group. Koran held the archway while families crossed. I tried to reach him, but the bridge was packed. He fought with an axe after giving me the sword. Ragna's nails dug into her palms. The blade broke in my hands, Alden said. Not because it failed, because I used it to catch the chain of the portcullis when Holt's men tried to lower it. The steel held long enough for the last children to pass beneath. Then it snapped. The dents, the rolled edge, dozens of impacts. Not Koran's last fight, Alden's. I crossed back after the civilians were clear, he continued. I found Koran behind the archway. He was alive. Ragna's knees weakened, but she refused to sit. Did he suffer? The question her mother had asked, the question Alden had refused to answer. His voice broke. Yes. Truth, unpolished. Ragna closed her eyes. I am sorry. Do not soften it now. I will not. Alden drew a shaking breath. He knew he was dying. He asked whether the children crossed. I told him they had. He laughed and said you would be angry he had given away your sword. A sound escaped Ragna, half sob and half laugh. He cut this bead from his braid and told me to take it to you. He said you would believe the blade before you believed an officer. Then Holt's guard came through the gate. They arrested me for disobedience. They took Koran's body with the others. I was held for 11 days. You became a hero. The Crown could not admit Holt had tried to abandon civilians. Too many witnesses survived. They changed the account, gave me a medal, called the defense my plan. And you accepted? Yes. That was the ugliest truth. Alden looked at her without asking mercy. Holt threatened to prosecute every soldier who disobeyed if I contradicted the report. Orc guards would have been hanged first. I told myself silence protected them. Perhaps it did. But I also protected my family's name. I wore the medal. I let songs turn Koran into a footnote. Ragna's grief moved through her in waves too large for anger to contain. For 7 years, she had imagined her sword breaking in Koran's hands. She had believed her own work failed him. She had hated the steel, the war, Alden, and herself. The blade had not failed. It had held a gate open. Why bury it? She whispered. Because Koran told me to bring it to you, and I was ashamed to stand at your door. I buried it beneath the hawthorn tree outside Red Hollow. Every year I went back. Every year I dug until I saw the cloth around the hilt. And every year I covered it again. Until now. Until Holt came for your forge. Ragna looked at the ring on her finger. Koran's steel. The steel that had held long enough. She wanted to strike Alden. She wanted to embrace him. She wanted 7 lost years returned to her family. Instead, she opened the forge door. Leave, she said. Alden stood with difficulty. Ragna, you gave me the truth. That was the condition. Now leave before I decide what it costs. He removed the wedding band. The sight hurt with startling violence. He placed it on the anvil beside her hammer. The hearing is tomorrow, he said. I will testify that the marriage was my deception. Holt will take the forge unless you find another protection. I know. I am sorry. I know. He walked into the night without his cloak. Ragna did not call him back. At noon the next day, Alden stood alone before the civil bench and confessed everything. The hurried marriage, Holt's order at Red Hollow, the abandoned civilians, and the medal built from another man's courage. Holt demanded his arrest. Then the courtroom doors opened. Ragna entered wearing her dark steel ring. Behind her came Mara, Keeper Saul, veterans from both companies, and 6 gray-haired survivors of Red Hollow. Noel carried the broken sword's old guard with the mountain hawk visible beneath the rust. My husband has a habit of deciding what I need without asking, Ragna told the magistrate. It is his worst quality. But the marriage is mine to affirm, and I affirm it. Alden stared at her. Ragna, the forge, is not why I came. She faced Holt. I came because my brother's name will no longer be buried beneath yours. One survivor spoke, then another. A former engineer produced the original demolition order he had hidden for 7 years. By sunset, Holt had lost his office, the arsenal levy was suspended, and a royal inquiry had begun. Alden surrendered his medal before anyone could take it. Outside the hall, rain silvered the steps. You should still hate me, he said. Part of me does. He accepted that with a quiet nod. Ragna took the broad wedding band from her pocket. But Corin trusted you when it mattered. You failed before that moment and after it. At the bridge, you did not. She slid the ring back onto his finger. I cannot return 7 years, Alden whispered. No. You can stop wasting the ones ahead. He looked at her as if hope hurt. Is this forgiveness? It is a beginning. May I kiss you? Ragna caught his coat and pulled him close. You ask too many questions. Their kiss beneath the courthouse arch was not evidence for a clerk or part of a bargain. It was angry, imperfect, rain-soaked, and entirely real. They held a second wedding 1 month later in the forge yard. This time there were no inspectors, no midnight deadline, and no lie between their hands. Mara brought flowers. Noel burned the bread. Keeper Soul repeated his warning about setting the house on fire. Ragna and Alden exchanged the same dark rings, newly polished but still marked by the grain of the sword. When Alden promised to offer strength without command, his voice shook. When Ragna promised truth, even when it cut, she added, and warmth, if you stop sleeping in the loft. The crowd laughed. Alden kissed her before the keeper finished granting permission. Years later, the Black Anvil became known for a strange service. Soldiers brought old blades, grieving families brought rusted spearheads, and former enemies brought pieces of armor. Ragna turned them into hinges, bells, cradle fittings, and wedding bands. Alden kept the records and still bought unnecessary fire pokers whenever he wanted an excuse to watch his wife work. Above the forge door hung Corin's broken sword guard and a new sign. What was made for war may yet become a promise. And whenever Ragna's hammer struck the anvil, the steel no longer sounded like a weapon being born. It sounded like a life being rebuilt. If this story of Ragna and Alden stayed with you, share where you are listening from and tell us whether you believe people can become more than their worst mistake. Subscribe for more fantasy romances about unlikely hearts choosing each other when the world tells them not to.